Here's everything you might have missed in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Folks, Phase 4 just got a whole lot bigger. After slicing through box office records like a hot razor fist through a bus, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is a certified hit with fans and critics alike. Marvel's martial arts movie introduced us to some phenomenal new characters, one of its best villains to date, and tons of unexpected connections to the MCU's past, present, and future. While we'll do a full scene-by-scene breakdown to comb through all the Easter eggs and hidden details when the film comes out on Blu-ray and digital, in the meantime, we've assembled what we think are almost all of the Easter eggs and hidden details that you might have missed. Obviously, to talk about this, we need to spoil what happens in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. So if you haven't seen this movie yet, make like Katie and pump the brakes.
We make a good team!
Okay, let's get into it, shall we? So the movie begins with a flashback to Wenwu's early days and his discovery of the titular Ten Rings. Unlike their comic book counterpart, which are actual rings, these are 10 mystical armbands that evoke the kind of iron rings used in martial arts training, and most famously worn by Gordon Liu in the 36th Chamber of Shaolin. In the comics, the Ten Rings are alien technology discovered by the Mandarin in China's Valley of the Spirits. First appearing in 1964's Tales of Suspense number 50, they belong to an alien race known as the McLuhans, but as we'll see in the post-credit scene of this movie, they allude to the fact that they're unlike anything else in this universe, alien or otherwise, but more on that in just a bit. We see the earliest flag for the Ten Rings, which features the Shuangguo, or the hook swords used by Wenwu's troops. Then we see how the Ten Rings continue to conquer their way across history, led by the now seemingly immortal Wenwu. As mentioned in our trailer breakdowns previously, Wenwu is an amalgam of two comic book characters, the Mandarin and Shang-Chi's father, Zheng Zhu, who was originally known as Fu Manchu, a character from pulp novelist Sax Rohmer's books, which were full of racist tropes and outdated stereotypes. Fu Manchu was eventually renamed Zheng Zhu in the comics after Marvel lost the rights to the original character, and now he's Wenwu, a person who has many names. Moving on, we eventually see Wenwu attempting to discover the entrance to the mystical land of Ta Lo, except he tries and fails and winds up having a sexy wuxia fight with his future wife, Ying Li. First appearing in Thor 301, Ta Lo is a pocket dimension adjacent to Earth where the gods of Chinese mythology dwell. Ta Lo is also home to all manner of fantastical creatures, as we'll see later in the film, like the phoenix-like Feng Huang, the massive Shishi, guardian lions, or Fu dogs as they're sometimes called, nine-tailed foxes known as Huli Jing, winged dragon-scaled horse creatures known as Longma, celestial dragons like the Great Protector, and of course, more creatures like Morris. And although Katie calls him a chicken pig, Morris is actually a Dijiang, an entity of pure chaos, which is what I aspire to be described as someday. And by the way, apologies if I butchered those pronunciations. I promise you I'm not trying to garble them as badly as I probably did. As we learn in the movie, Ta Lo exists in a constantly shifting state, and it's only accessible from Earth once every 10 years. And while our Iron Fist theory about Michelle Yeoh's character Ying Nan was sadly incorrect, Ta Lo does share some major comic book DNA with Kunlun, another mystical city in a pocket dimension that's accessible once every 10 years. So, sound familiar? I sure think so. Except the difference is, one trains Shang-Chi in the ways of the open hand, and one trains Danny Rand in the ways of the Iron Fist. And while we may not have an Iron Fist in this movie, there is an Iron Gang who murder Shang-Chi's mom in front of him as a kid. And this sends Wenwu down a dark path and begins Shang-Chi's training as an assassin. The Ten Rings facility where Shang-Chi trains is evocative of the House of the Deadly Hand, which first appeared in Special Marvel Edition number 15. It was his dad's evil HQ. Shang-Chi also trains under the masked tutelage of Death Dealer, a character in the comics that was an MI6 agent secretly working for Shang-Chi's dad. He also dies a horrible death in the comics, burned alive by a brazier, but arguably his death in the movie, having his soul sucked out of his body, is way worse. Now, much like in the comics, as a wee teenager, Shang-Chi is sent off by his father on his first mission, to assassinate a target, and just like in his comic book origins, Shang-Chi is deeply disillusioned by what he does, fleeing his father's clutches. We catch up with our hero a decade later in San Francisco, where he's living as Sean and working as a valet alongside his pal Katie in a costume that echoes what he'll be wearing much later in the film. Inside Shang-Chi's apartment, you can see a number of movie posters, including Kung Fu Hustle, The Warriors, and The Godfather, so pretty good taste. And speaking of posters, later on you can see a pair of flyers on the wall when Shang-Chi is en route to Katie's family's house that confirm this film does in fact take place in the aftermath of Avengers Endgame. One poster is for a post-blip anxiety support group, which I imagine is similar to the kind we saw Steve Rogers running during Avengers Endgame. The other is for Blip Sync, a dating app for people that were affected by the Snapchat. And honestly, I'm glad they went with Blip Sync because all I can come up with is Dust a Nut, which is not good. Moving on, we come to the bus fight, which is maybe my favorite action sequence in the entire film, thanks to the amazing fight choreography of the late, great Brad Allen, who was a protege of Jackie Chan and a member of the Jackie Chan stunt team, and you can see that DNA in this fight. Shang-Chi is confronted by some of Wenwu's goons, including Razor Fist, the guy with a razor for a fist. Razor Fist first appeared in Master of Kung Fu 105 and went on to become a constant thorn in the side of characters like Wolverine. Now, interestingly enough, they never say his name out loud in the movie, but it's confirmed by his vanity plate and his card, both of which read Razor Fist loud and proud. So let's just say that subtlety isn't his strong suit. It's having a fist that's a literal razor. Now, speaking of subtlety, if you thought your boy Clev recording that fight breaking out on the bus because he has some martial arts training when he was a kid looks familiar, well, that's because he's appeared in the MCU before. Actor Zach Cherry first appeared in Spider-Man Homecoming as a street vendor who asked Spider-Man to do a flip.
Do a flip! Yeah!
And now clearly he's taking a well-deserved vacation, and now is the winter of his content. Now, speaking of badass fight scenes, later on we come to the underground fighting tournament in Macau at the Golden Daggers Club, which is run by Shang-Chi's sister, Xia Ling. The Golden Daggers is a reference to a sect of assassins run by his sister in Master of Kung Fu number 44. Here, though, it's basically like a dark web fight club full of live-streamed blood sport. As we head through the club, we can see two surprising characters fighting each other, someone in a Black Widow-esque costume fighting a dude who's glowing orange. Played by Jay Ju, who also appeared in Black Widow, this character is billed as Widow, and this suggests that she is in fact one of the Black Widows freed from the Red Room's mind control, and is currently earning a living in underground cage matches. The person she's fighting seems to be affected by Aldrich Killian's Extremis technology from Iron Man 3, which, if you recall, gives the user superhuman strength and a healing factor, but here's hoping that he's not the explodey kind of Extremis. Now, as we covered previously, the biggest surprise in the Golden Daggers Club sequence is the battle between everybody's favorite exasperated sorcerer Wong and Abomination, the villain from 2008's Incredible Hulk, who we have neither seen nor heard from since 2008's Incredible Hulk. After taking Abomination out with a similar portal trick that he employed on Cull Obsidian in Avengers Infinity War, we see Wong and Abomination talk and shop about how they're secretly choreographing these fights for money. So clearly Wong needs to raise some cash to patch up the Hulk-shaped hole in the Sanctum Sanctorum's roof so it'll stop snowing inside like we see in Spider-Man No Way Home. So is Wong sneaking Abomination out using sorcery, or is Abomination training so he can join whatever Dark Avengers or Thunderbolt-style organization that Val is secretly putting together? And if you want to know more about that theory, check out our recent video all about it, which I will link in the description below. Moving on, Abomination isn't the only unexpected character to make a triumphant return in this movie, because inside the Ten Rings compound, we encounter the first person to rock the Mandarin moniker in the MCU, and that is Trevor Slattery. Outed as an actor hired by Aldrich Killian in Iron Man 3, Trevor Slattery is now being kept as a prisoner by Wenwu, performing Shakespeare and other plays for him and the members of the Ten Rings. Now, this also provides some much-needed closure from the 2014 Marvel one-shot All Hail the King, a short film that appeared on the Thor the Dark World home video release and was recently added to Disney+. Long story short, it involves an agent of the Ten Rings breaking Trevor out of jail so he can meet the very real, very unhappy Mandarin who is not thrilled by this case of identity theft. But apparently Wenwu is pretty thrilled with Trevor's performance of Macbeth, as evidenced by what he's quoting in this film. Also thrilled with Trevor? It's your boy Morris. They are truly a match made in heaven, and as we'll see later, Trevor's apparently such a good actor that Morris can't even tell when he's playing dead.
I'm an actor.
Now, during the film's climax, our heroes finally make their way to Ta Lo, where Shang-Chi studies his mother's style of martial arts with his aunt. In their fighting arena, if you look closely towards the ground, there's a sculpture of the Great Protector Dragon there. We also see Shang-Chi finally don his comics-inspired costume made from dragon scales, and speaking of the Great Protector, while many fans thought this might be Fin Fang Foom or another McLuhan character, here it seems to be an original character inspired by Chinese mythology to help protect the people of Ta Lo from evil. And speaking of that evil, we learn they have sealed away a great evil known as the Dweller in Darkness, who's psychically manipulating Wenwu by making him think his dead wife is being held prisoner behind the Dark Gate. The massive, soul-sucking creature is a living nightmare when it finally emerges, bringing on some serious Lovecraftian horror to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The Dweller in Darkness first appeared in Thor number 229, and he is one of the Fear Lords, an embodiment of mankind's collective terror. He kind of looks like a massive blue octopus man, which is very different from that other massive octopus we saw in What If episode 1 and 4. Although considering Adventures of the X-Men #4 confirmed him to be Cthulhu's offspring, he definitely isn't a character to be taken lightly. And given that the Dweller in Darkness most often tussled with Doctor Strange in the comics, it makes sense that he'd be mentioned in the same breath as other Lovecraftian tentacled terrors like Shuma-Gorath. And speaking of otherworldly nightmare creatures using this segue a lot today, let's talk about the Soul Eaters. Those weird murder bats, they're also straight out of the comics. First appearing in 1974's Doctor Strange #2, these sixth dimension denizens are just as creepy and gross in the movie as they are in print. During the final fight, we see Shang-Chi unleash what Katie will later describe at the restaurant as a Kamehameha, a reference to Goku's signature attack on Dragon Ball Z. Now, during that standoff with Wenwu, Shang-Chi channels a golden energy through the 10 rings rather than the blue energy that his father Wenwu channels. It's most likely during this battle when Shang-Chi takes control of all 10 rings that they activate whatever beacon is hidden inside of them. Now, that beacon is discussed at length in the first post-credit scene with Carol Danvers, Bruce Banner, and Wong all stumped as to their origins. But if you want to know more about that scene and the second post-credit scene with Xialing and the 10 rings, then make sure you watch our recent video breakdown. Anyway, folks, there you have it. That is everything we spotted in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. The film is a phenomenal addition to Phase 4, and these characters have so much potential moving forward. I just can't wait to see them explore that in full. And while I'm sad that Wenwu came and went Wu, he's easily one of the best villains in the MCU to date. As for what the future holds for Shang-Chi and company, well, they're going to have their work cut out for them between the impending multiversal mayhem coming their way and whatever those 10 rings signaled. Of course, we'll just have to wait and see what that is, but in the meantime, we've got plenty of other theories, Easter eggs, and deep dives waiting for you over on Nerdist.com. For now, though, tell me, what did you think of Shang-Chi? Did you spot anything that we missed, and what do you want to see from a chequel? Let us know in the comments below, and for the latest and greatest in the world of pop culture, stay tuned to Nerdist.com.